The slap of books hitting the floor cut through the hallway. Laughter followed. My hands shook as I bent down, and a shoe kicked my notebook farther away. I wanted to disappear, but that was only the beginning. I was 13 the first time they decided I was their target. The hallway smelled of wet boots and chalk dust. I clutched my books tight, head down, hoping no one would notice me. But in that school, they always noticed. "Look at her shoes," one voice shouted, sharp, cruel, straight from the garbage. The sound of laughter was instant, like a match thrown on gasoline. My face burned, my throat closed. I tried to walk faster, but a shove from behind sent me stumbling. My books scattered across the dirty floor. I dropped to my knees to grab them, but another foot kicked my notebook down the hall. More laughter. Someone whispered close to my ear. Pathetic. I didn't look up, didn't answer, just gathered what I could and pushed myself into the classroom before the teacher arrived. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear the lesson. That night, I replayed every second in my head. The words, the shove, the laughter echoing in the hallway. I asked myself why? Why me? What had I done? The next morning, I begged my mother to let me stay home. She looked at me, confused. "School's important, don't be weak." So I went, and the war started all over again. The cafeteria, the lockers, even the bus, there was no safe place. Whispers turned to shouts, names stuck like glue, ugly, stupid, worthless. Sometimes they didn't even bother whispering. Sometimes it was spit on the back of my jacket. I stopped speaking in class. I stopped raising my hand. I started counting minutes, hours, days, just trying to survive. And deep down, a thought grew that I couldn't erase. Maybe they're right. Maybe I really am what they say. That was the first scar they left on me, and it never truly faded. By the second month, it wasn't just words. It was bruises. Small ones at first. A shove into a locker, an elbow in the ribs when teachers weren't looking. Then worse. My lunch tray flipped onto the floor, milk dripping down my skirt while everyone laughed. A pencil snapped in my hand because someone smacked it from behind. The cruelest part wasn't the pain. It was the silence. Teachers saw. They always saw. The red face, the shaking hands, the food on the floor. But they just looked away. Once Mr. Harris, my history teacher, caught me wiping tears in the back row. He paused, his eyes locking with mine for a moment. Then he turned back to the board and kept teaching. That silence cut deeper than the laughter. At home, I tried to hide it. My mother asked why my blouse was torn. I lied, said, "I tripped." My father just grunted from his chair, the newspaper hiding his face. No one pressed me. Maybe they didn't want to know, but I needed someone, anyone. One day after class, I went to the school counselor. I sat there, twisting my hands, telling her how the others wouldn't stop, how they pushed me, called me names, cornered me in the halls. She nodded. She wrote something on a piece of paper. Then she smiled politely and said, "Try to ignore them. If you don't react, they'll get bored. Ignore them." That night, I stared at myself in the bathroom mirror. My hair was messy, my lips split from the latest shove. I tried to imagine ignoring the spit on my jacket, the laughter that shook the halls. I tried to imagine not reacting when someone slapped my books onto the floor again. It felt impossible. The next day I tested it. I kept my face blank when they whispered. I kept walking when they shoved. I picked up my books in silence, but instead of getting bored, they got angrier. "Why won't you fight back?" one of them sneered, shoving me harder than before. The truth was I wanted to fight. Every bone in me screamed to shout, to punch, to make them stop. But fear locked me in chains. My silence gave them permission, and the more I stayed silent, the more invisible I became. Teachers didn't ask me questions anymore. Classmates pretended I wasn't there. I wasn't just a target now. I was a ghost walking through school halls. But ghosts remember every word, every shove, every smirk. And one day I knew those memories would come back to haunt me. It was a Friday. I remember because the cafeteria smelled like greasy pizza, and the whole school buzzed louder than usual. I sat at the far corner table as always, picking at my food, trying to make myself small. They came in a group, 5 of them, laughing before they even reached me. I knew what was coming. My stomach twisted, but I kept my eyes down. One of the boys grabbed my tray. "You don't need this," he said, and dumped it onto the floor. Sauce and cheese splattered across my shoes. The table roared with laughter. I froze. My heart thudded in my ears. I reached to grab the tray back, but another hand shoved me hard against the bench. My hip slammed into the wood. The pain shot up my side, but I stayed quiet. That wasn't enough for them. It never was. "Stand up," a girl demanded. Her voice was sharp, cutting. I shook my head. She yanked my arm until I stumbled to my feet. The cafeteria had gone silent now. Hundreds of eyes stared. I felt them all burning holes into me. "Say it," she sneered. "Say you're worthless." The room spun. My mouth went dry. I whispered, "No." The slap came so fast I didn't even see it. My cheek burned. The crowd gasped, then laughed again. Tears welled, but I held them back. My throat ached with the scream I swallowed. They wanted to see me break. That was the game. The girl shoved me again. "Say it," she shouted. I couldn't. My body shook, my fists clenched, but no words came. Then someone behind me kicked the back of my knees. I collapsed onto the dirty floor, my book spilling from my bag. The laughter grew so loud it drowned out everything else. And in that moment, I broke. Not out loud, not in front of them, but inside. A part of me, the part that still believed maybe things would change, maybe tomorrow would be better, died right there on that cafeteria floor. No teacher came to stop it. No friend stood up for me. I was alone, completely alone. When the bell finally rang and the crowd dispersed, I gathered my things with shaking hands. My face was hot, my knees bruised, my pride shattered. That night, I sat on my bed, staring at the wall. The voices replayed again and again. Worthless, ugly, nobody. I pressed my hands to my ears, but it didn't stop. I realized then, school wasn't just a place of learning for me. It was a battlefield, and every day I was the enemy they wanted to destroy. And worst of all, they were winning. After that day in the cafeteria, I stopped talking altogether. Teachers called my name, but I just stared at my desk. Kids mocked me and I didn't react. Silence became my shield. One afternoon I hid in the library, the only place where laughter didn't echo. The smell of old paper and dust was comforting. I pulled a random book from the shelf, just to have something in my hands. It was a collection of poems, not the kind teachers forced us to read. This one felt raw, personal, like the writer had lived through something painful and survived. I sat there, flipping pages, and for the first time in months, I felt less alone. Someone else in the world had felt broken too. That became my ritual. Every day after class, I went to the library. Books became my armor. The bullies couldn't touch me there. They didn't care about dusty shelves and old words. One day, as I sat reading, a soft voice said, "You like that one?" I looked up, startled. A boy stood in front of me, not one of them, different. He had messy hair, a shy smile. He pointed to the book in my hands. That's one of my favorites. I didn't answer. I didn't trust him. But he didn't leave. He sat at the next table, pulled out his own book, and began to read. He didn't mock me. He didn't stare. He just sat there. For weeks, it went on like that. He never pushed, never asked questions, just read near me. His quiet presence was the first time I felt a crack in the walls I'd built around myself. One afternoon, he slid a folded note onto my table. My hands trembled as I opened it. It said, "You're not invisible." I stared at those words for a long time. Tears blurred the letters. Nobody had said something like that to me before. For the first time in months, I smiled, a small smile, weak but real. That note was just paper, but for me, it was a lifeline. The bullies didn't stop. They never would. But something inside me began to change. One day, when a girl shoved my books to the floor, I bent down slowly, calmly, and when she sneered, "Pick it up, loser," I looked up, straight into her eyes, and didn't look away. It wasn't much, just a stare, but it shook her. She blinked, muttered something, and walked off. That was new. For the first time, I felt a spark of control. The boy from the library noticed too. "You look stronger today," he whispered as we passed in the hallway. I didn't answer, but inside I felt something I hadn't in months. Pride. The bullying didn't vanish overnight. They still mocked, shoved, laughed. But my silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was defiance. Every time I stood taller, every time I stared back, I chipped away at their power. At night, I still cried sometimes. But now, I had his note hidden under my pillow. "You're not invisible." I read it until the words etched into me. Slowly, I began to believe them. And when you start to believe you matter, even just a little, everything changes. It happened in the spring. The air was warmer, the year nearly over. I thought maybe I'd made it through the worst. But bullies never like losing. They cornered me outside after school, 3 of them, waiting near the bike racks. "Think you're tough now?" one boy sneered. "Think you're better than us?" I froze. My heart raced. For a moment, the fear was back, thick and choking. Then I heard footsteps behind me. The boy from the library. He didn't run, didn't yell. He just stepped beside me, close enough our shoulders almost touched. "She's not alone," he said. It was just 4 words, but they landed like thunder. The bullies scoffed, muttered, shoved past us, but they didn't push further. Not that day. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. My legs shook, but I stayed standing. That night, I realized the pain they gave me would never fully vanish. The scars would stay, but they hadn't broken me completely, because I wasn't invisible anymore. Now, sitting here as an old woman, I can still feel the sting of those days. The hallways, the laughter, the silence of adults who looked away, the bruises healed, the books were replaced, but the words, those stayed. They carved themselves deep inside me, like scars under the skin that no one else can see. For years I carried them, even after school ended, even when I got a job, even when I married. Those whispers followed me, ugly, worthless, nobody. I could be surrounded by people and still feel like that 13-year-old girl standing alone in the cafeteria with pizza sauce dripping down her shoes. It took me decades to understand something important. They weren't laughing at me. They were laughing at the piece of themselves they hated and threw onto me because it was easier than facing their own pain. Bullies don't choose targets because of who you are. They choose them because of what they lack. But back then, I didn't know. Back then, I thought their words were truth. And sometimes, even now, when the house is quiet, I still hear them. But here's what they couldn't take from me: the will to survive. I made it through every shove, every insult, every long night of tears. I made it through when no one stood beside me, except one boy in the library who reminded me that I wasn't invisible. That note, those 4 words, changed me. Not immediately, not like a miracle, but they planted something inside me, a seed that said, "You matter," even if they don't see it. That seed grew slowly, quietly, until one day I looked in the mirror and saw not a victim, but a survivor. The truth is, I never became fearless. Even as an adult, I carried hesitation. Crowded rooms made me uneasy. Harsh laughter still twisted my stomach. But I built a life anyway. I raised children, I worked hard, and when I saw cruelty in the world, I spoke up, because I knew what silence cost. Looking back, I realized school didn't just try to break me, it forged me, pain by pain, scar by scar. It shaped a girl who refused to stay invisible. And now, as a grandmother, I tell this story not because it's easy, but because it matters. Somewhere out there is another girl, sitting alone in a cafeteria, believing she is worthless. To her I say, you are not what they call you. You are not the laughter, the shove, the silence. You are more. They tried to erase me. They failed. Because here I am, telling the story they never wanted me to tell. And when I finish speaking, the echoes of their laughter finally fade. Not gone, but powerless.